Service Lab is a community of service design doers and the service design curious. We meet up every few months to share our learnings with each other.
Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to Designing for Healthcare. Hi. We are very excited for everybody to be here, and also we noticed that there's a lot of first-timers who's never been here before, who never joined Service Labs. Oh, that's quite a lot. Yeah, welcome. We're very excited for today's topic in healthcare because it has been a very popular topic. So we are very excited to be learning more about this topic from our experienced speakers along with you in such a beautiful space that is sponsored by Transform. Yeah. Before we get into that, with all the details, I would like to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do at Service Lab. So Service Lab is a space for everybody who interested in service design, design research, or user research, or just people who are design enthusiasts to come together like yourself today and to exchange knowledge and inspire each other, share your experiences. So we run events both online and in person. It's voluntary based. So we, four of us right now, it's volunteers. Yes, please enjoy the event today. And next one, we would like to invite Transform team to come and introduce themselves a little bit and also about the space and health and safety as well. Please invite, please Ian, come. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome very much to Great Portland Street and to Transform and the Next 15 group. We hope you have a really good evening here with us tonight. There's three fascinating talks. I hope mine's fascinating. There's certainly two fascinating talks, but also get the chance to meet people that you haven't met before, the chance to find out a bit about what each other gets up to and what we do with our work. Because our work is really one of how do you crack challenging issues? How do you find answers to big strategic questions? How do you find ways to improve people's lives and make things better? Sometimes it can be the simplest things that we do, and that's really what we're about here at Transform. We're a business that's been around for 20 years. We work extensively in the public sector, but also in the private sector in places like utilities, in automotive, in retail. And we do everything from research and fundamental investigations and research at the start, right the way through to big technology builds, implementation, and change and delivery. So we're a team of about 200 staff now, and we have an equally large number of associates and contractors who work with us consistently. So we're a great team to be part of, and we love to meet new people and be part of new communities. So thank you very much for coming along, and very much hope you enjoy the talks to come.
Any fire safety stuff?
Oh yes, I should do that, yes. Good point. There are no fire drills tonight, so if an alarm does go off, there is a exit just to the right behind this group here, or obviously we have the fire escape through to the other side. So we will lead you out if an event occurs where the alarm goes off. Loos-wise and housekeeping-wise, we have loos just behind this wall. There's a corridor just behind this wall if anybody does need to go for a bathroom break. And they're all on the same floors all the way down. They're just below each other. So yes, I think that's all the housekeeping.
Thank you so much. Okay. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we're volunteers, so we will be introducing ourselves and our visual description. So roughly we have Charley, myself, Beth, Rupert. Yeah, please. Rupert's not here today, although he's a co-founder and he has been supporting us since day one in the background. Yeah, would you like to?
Hi, I'm Charley or Charlotte, and I'm a freelance service and interaction designer. My pronouns are she and her, and I am a white woman with short brown hair wearing a black top and jeans. And I like working on prototyping, lots of different freelance clients, and I've previously spoken at Service Lab on evaluating digital health products and also about CALDA, the LGBT mental health app, which I previously co-founded. So thanks so much for coming.
And that's me, Beth. I'm an Southeast Asian woman with long hair, wearing a yellow top and a pair of jeans. I'm a service designer. Currently, I work in IT services at 3 different local governments. And I graduated that from MA in service design from UAL. I've seen some familiar faces today, yay! Yeah, so I'm very excited to be here. I've been working with Service Labs for over a year now. Yeah, my interest is in design for public services. And lastly,
hi everyone, my name's Charley. I've been running Service Lab for about 5 years or so. I'm just scanning the room to see if Jenny, our other co-founder, is here.
she's got COVID.
So Service Lab was actually started by Jenny and Rupert, and then it passed on to myself, and now we've got a lovely team of volunteers. We are always looking for more people to get involved though, so do come and have a chat with us if you're interested. I'm a service designer and user researcher. I've got a real kind of passion for inclusive design. I went freelance and started inclusively about 4.5 years ago now. I mainly work across the healthcare sector, government and charity sectors. If you're needing any support in those sort of spaces, come have a chat. And my pronouns are she, her, and I am a fairly short white woman wearing a white top, wearing some fun coloured earrings, and I've got medium length brown hair.
Yeah, for your information, we are recording this event because we would like to share it further with our wider audience. So we actually have our YouTube channel. If you want to see the previous event or even this event once again, if you're very impressed. So it's just go on the search bar and type Service Lab London, it should appear. So if any of you don't feel comfortable being recorded, please just let any of us know. Thank you. Okay, yeah, so this one, we would like to ask if any of you have any event space at your office or you have any ideas regarding the topics, please feel free to suggest to any of us here today. And we are trying something new tonight. We have a 5 minutes graduate speaker, or for the speakers for people who are looking to get into service design or design researcher or design related roles. So we already have one person, so we would like one more person. If you could come up and maybe let us know in advance, and then just introduce yourself and your background and what sort of things that you're looking for. Yeah, this is something new, so we'll see how it goes. Yeah, it would be about halfway through the event. And yeah, this is our speakers today, as you recognize that she is doing both today. So yeah, this topic is very popular, designing for healthcare. We have Kaitlin Devella, Ian Pocock, and Charley Pothecary. And I will run you through the agenda quickly. Now the event will end about 8 p.m., but it could go over time, so just to let you know that. So we'll have 10 minutes of the talk and 5 minutes for Q&A. So start off with Ian and then Charley, and then we'll have the graduate speakers, and then we end with Kaitlin, and that's the wrapped up. Okay, so our first speaker is Ian. I would like to introduce Ian. He's a MD for Human-Centered Design, worked here at Transform. And his team and him worked producing a lot of impactful products and services globally. He works with Public Health England and also the Australian government. But today, he will be sharing his journey and his behind the scene of the application called Cows to 5K that has kickstarted 7 million fitness journeys. Please welcome Ian Pocock.
Good evening again. So I'm Ian Pocock. I am he, him, and I am a white, very middle-aged man who comes from the west of England. So I'm delighted to be here in London talking to everybody. What can I say about the journey that we went on with Couch to 5K? you dream about having projects like this come along in your career. If you get half of one, you think this is what this is all about. How do you answer a question like preventative healthcare? How do you prevent the challenges that people have later on in life through poor health as a result of either ill health or because of lifestyle choices which cause a lot of long-term conditions that lead to people having challenges that around comorbidities and so forth. So many of the behaviours, the choices, the foods we eat, the activities we do or don't do, whether we smoke, the amount of alcohol we drink, all of those have a very significant bearing on how well we are going to age later on in life. And when Public Health England were looking at this, they wanted to really change the agenda around preventative healthcare. It's very expensive keeping people in hospital, to the tune of £11 billion a year as a result of illnesses that are often caused by the different behaviours and the different choices that we make. As many as 40% of the deaths could be potentially due to preventable risk factors that we've had. And then 15 million of us will live with a long-term condition or are living with a long-term condition. So when Public Health England published its preventable health strategy in the early 2013, 2014, they wanted to look at a way in which we could support people on that change journey. They could identify the challenges around their health and then make those changes. So as I said in my introduction, Transform is a place that thinks about knotty problems. We want to try and answer those issues that have no natural blueprint, have no natural solution. And the thing about changing behaviours and coming up with solutions and products and services that can change those behaviours, there is no blueprint for that. We are all individuals. We are all different. We all respond to different stimuluses. We all have different motivations. We all have different opportunities and capabilities. And so when Public Health England wanted to embark on this journey, they were very they utilised the work done by Lou Atkins, Susan Mickey and Robert West in creating the behaviour change wheel and the combi model at the heart of that. And they wanted to look at how you could take that thinking and that model into the design of services and the understanding of services. And at the heart of this model, for those that have not been familiar with it, is that you've got the behaviour change model of capability, opportunity and motivation. So that's your physical, your psychological, your social, your reflective abilities to be either intrinsically motivated or extrinsically motivated, to have the opportunities to make changes, and also have the capability to do that through different things. And then on the middle layer you have the interventions that you can look at to try and shift those behaviours, and on the outer layer you have the policy tools that you could use to make those changes. So that all comes together into a shifting dynamic around behaviour and how we think about behaviour change. And some of the things that we discovered in our research around the programme was that sometimes not getting an answer is actually an answer. Health checks had been around, so there was a big movement around health checks. But so the thing around 1U and the programme around Couch 5K and the tools that we're going to discuss was about changing behaviours in middle age. So when you're between 40 and 60 is kind of your sort of last chance to make the right choices and to make the change so that you can age well later on in life. If you don't make those changes now, if you continue with unhealthy lifestyles, if you continue to smoke or to drink too much alcohol, you can sort of embed those issues in your kind of health journey. So what they found with health checks and a number of other things within the healthcare system is that when people go, they're asked questions like, can you tell me your blood pressure? Can you tell me your BMI? How many units of alcohol do you drink each week? And you're asked to fill out these forms and make these sorts of and make these sorts of answer these questionnaires, people don't do it. People don't complete it. People are worried about turning up, number one, for health checks, to be concerned about what would happen to what they might find out. There's a big issue around that in the research we discovered. But also, it's terribly off-putting if you don't know the answer to something. If you don't actually know what your blood pressure is or what your BMI is, you tend to, there's kind of big attrition for being engaged in the kind of health journey. So we needed to look at a way in which we could keep people engaged in understanding what the impact of their choices were having on their health. So the other thing we discovered in this is community was tremendously important to people. So if you want to help people change, community and being part of social inclusion is a massive driving factor, both motivational but also around your opportunity and your capability to do change. And the third thing that was kind of very significant around this was identity. People wanted to be part of the community, but they also didn't want their identity to be fundamentally shifted. So research with people found that if your role in your life and in your world was to make the massive meal for the family, and that was your identity, was being about having your family around you while you had kind of big meals, or your identity was hosting big events. If you then said, stop doing that, you need to change that, you need to have much smaller meals, or you need to not have it be about the family, you need to, you took away their identity. And so the idea of that was a kind of really big barrier to change. Equally, pubs on a Friday night for people could be a big identity, could be a big part of their community. If you take that away from people, they're very resistant to the change. So we saw this throughout the research that we did and throughout the kind of work we did with users to get there. And what we identified is, before we got to Couch to 5K or before we got to any of the other tools that we built, was we needed people to identify the impact of the decisions they were having. So we created How Are You? And How Are You was a kind of response to the health checks agenda, which was looking at how do you keep people identifying what they do and how they behave and what the impact is of those decisions on their lifestyle and their potential outcomes. So it was a quiz, it was a questionnaire, and it took people through a journey, quite a lengthy journey. Initially it was designed to be about 10 questions, and we kind of realised you probably couldn't get there in 10 questions. So we took people through quite an extensive journey. What you'll notice about this, and this will lead on some of the discussions that we're going to talk a bit later about with content, it was so important about the language that you use. I talked about this idea of, if you don't understand, the likelihood of you dropping out, the likelihood of you not being engaged for long, was very high. So questions like, apart from not getting ill, what are your top 3 health priorities? You know, who depends on you being healthy? What stops you taking care of yourself? Those are the sorts of questions which people responded to really well. And when we tested it, we worked through rough prototypes and concepts, and we ended up with testing those with a large number of people. And it was that kind of language. And we had to work with the policy team really hard, because they want to ask direct health questions. They want to ask kind of very evidence-based questions around health and make sure they got the right answers. We had to do that. And you'll notice that some of the content, particularly around can't run for a bus or full of beans, would be really kind of counterintuitive. It's not very specific. It's not very accurate. I don't know what it means if you can't run for a bus. But the point was, how do you engage people in a way where they identified with themselves, with their peers? And it was also very visual. So we looked at the types of meal we had in a very visual way. We talked about what we were trying to get from that was people to identify that certain types of meals or certain sizes of meals or certain amounts of alcohol, or obviously smoking, were things that were visually they could recognise and say that looks like me. That looks like what I've my life. And therefore, from that, you'd be able to generate a kind of outcome, a set of results from it, tell you where you are and the things that you could improve on. And all the way through, we had this content that was just nudging them forward and engaging them on the way that they want to do it. One of the things really interesting is we didn't think the score would be big deal. The score was a massive deal at the end of How Are You, actually being able to score where they were, rather than just red, amber, green. We thought red, amber, green would be where it was at. Actually, the numbers really mattered to people. So these were the apps that then came off the back of it. Easy Meals, Drinks Tracker, Couch 5K. NHS Smoke Free was already an app, but they wanted it brought into the portfolio. Sugar Smart was aimed more at families and young families, but nonetheless was sort of part of the portfolio that we built as well. So how do we get to Couch 5K from that? So all of the things I've talked about there in terms of how do you get people along a journey? How do you keep them involved? How do you give them the content and language in a way which they identify with which they can understand and which doesn't make them an outlier in their community but makes them part of their community. They were all the design principles that sort of underpinned what we did. So as you can see, it very much became about the journey. People were worried, but I'm not fit. I can't possibly go for a Run 5K. This program had been created already. It wasn't that we created the program or PHE created the program. There was already in existence. And what a brilliant program it was for a kind of concept of just taking people through very short, very small steps, but actually over a defined period of time. So in 9 weeks, you can achieve it. One of the things we did with the research was there were research with families where everyone gets motivated in January, and they went on the sort of health kick in January after Christmas. Exercise bikes that were unused, or DVDs around exercise videos that were open and people didn't achieve what they wanted to achieve, and so they gave up. This is about keeping people on a journey. This was about keeping people attached to the program. So again, we stayed with very much the same components, the idea of sort of visual, how to get started, the tips, the stories of what people like me might have done, and that was a really powerful way of being able to get that community aspect forward. And then the idea of progression, being able to track your progress over time. How did you feel about it? How did you feel when you completed that week? So people were kind of constantly had this referral back to themselves. Oh, wrong way. And of course, the trainers. This was probably one of the most fun parts of the whole thing. So there's a whole bunch of testing that went on around who was most motivational. Well, if you really want to know, Joe Wiley, very motivational, very motivational. So the idea of the trainers was really important. The BBC were on side, which meant obviously the scalability of the app was considerably easier than if you're launching an app without their enormous help and star power. Sanjeev Kohli's voice, and then we launched with the two. Initially, we submitted to the App Store with just the two, but then Sarah Millican and Michael Johnson. We tested other voices. Not sure if I'm allowed to say who they were because they might feel upset they weren't in it, but we did test them, and it was interesting to know how people responded and how people came across with those voices and how they felt they spoke to them. So that was kind of really popular. And if you want an idea of how quickly this was done, we started the project. It was 9 years ago now, so we started the project for the first How Are You research in July 2015. And the How Are You, the 1U website, and all of the apps were launched by the end of March 2016. Worked with an amazing company called Dogfish, who are a special mobile developer who had a platform that they used to make sure we could bring all the data backwards and forwards, and they could drive next best actions and drive behaviours. So in the course of less than a year, we created this whole program from the ground up. And I went back on when Charley very kindly invited me to speak. I went back on to see how much of it was still going and how much of it was still there. And the How Are You tool is still there, and it still says, how do you feel knackered, or are you full of beans? Can you run for a bus? And it just shows that the research and the content design that went into it from the team has had a real lasting effect. And at the beginning, it was mentioned about going to Australia. We got a phone call from the Australian Department of Health saying, that How Are You tool on that Couch to 5K app, can we have the same thing in Australia? So we went and had the privilege of doing that for a couple of years just before the joys of COVID. But in healthcare, I say the message really is thinking about preventative health is about identifying with people. It's about human understanding. It's about what they want to achieve, not necessarily what you think you need to tell them, but the way that they'll best consume it. And if you can do that, you can take them on that journey where they fundamentally go through a transformation. So I think that's my time. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was very interesting from a simple question, how are you, to all this across the world to Australia. So I think we have time for 2 questions. Anyone would, oh, there's one question over there. Yes, oh, there's 2, all right. Yeah, would you like to? I'll run. Oh, this is for recording.
Oh, it's 2. Wow, okay. Hello. Hi, Ian. Hi, right. You spoke about a lot around the success of Couch to 5K was around progression and doing a tiny bit so that you get very close to your goal, and it's like that journey to 0 to 1. Do you think that reasoning is applicable to also breaking negative habits and negative behaviors, such as it's applicable to like smoking or addiction, and breaking those negative patterns?
Hold that thought. Bit of suspense.
Suitable for this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, so I certainly don't propose to be an expert in addiction or breaking addictions, but I do think that one of the big barriers is that not barriers as such, but one of the kind of clear points that Public Health England and the health system were not prepared to countenance was the idea of step down around smoking in particular. But it's none is good. There is no one that's good. So this was pre-vape, since there was lots of conversation and things like that around that time to do with vaping. But on that matter of smoking, that was a kind of definitive point. In terms of alcohol, there was lots of policy insight around reducing alcohol consumption and what happens if alcohol consumption is too dangerous and the programs you need to advise people to go into. So I think it's certainly not for tools like this or for necessarily for non-experts like myself to be saying this is the way to step down. But there were quite clear things where if alcohol consumption was too high, then it needed to be referrals to other programs and using their expertise to take people down that. Around smoking, it is sort of none is okay, 1 is bad. Very binary. Thanks. Ooh. Do you want to? Probably should get down.
I have a quick question around the kind of, the evaluation of the health outcomes and how you, if that was measured or how that was measured, especially with something like this, which is long term, and also there are multiple factors that feed into it. And if you're able to actually isolate the impact that Couch to 5K and those similar programs had, I'm interested in hearing a bit about that.
Thank you. Yeah, certainly we didn't do the evaluation of it on the health outcomes. I think the purpose of the program was to get people into a change program. So did it achieve that outcome rather than necessarily the health outcome of running Couch to 5K? That was a sort of separate ambition. In terms of did the program achieve its goal, which was can you get people to stick through the questionnaire? That was one of the big things. They thought it'd be 30% completion. It was running about 74% completion certainly for the first couple of years. Likewise with the apps, it was how many people would transfer into the downloads of the apps, how many people would actually complete the program. So that was more the evaluation of it. It's hard to, I can't say that we didn't evaluate it, but I know other people evaluated Couch to 5K as a concept, yeah. Does that help? Did you have a... Sorry.
Where am I going? Yeah. Over there. Would you like to come up here? Yeah.
Oh yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, Ian. Just a couple of quick ones. I mean, you can answer one, but both are related. What are some of the biggest challenges that you faced in the whole journey? And, what are some of the toughest failure stories? And did you get a chance to resolve them in any way? or turn them around in any way?
So I think the toughest part of the whole journey was definitely working with the policy and research teams, because quite reasonably they wanted to make sure that it was evidence based, and so the score that you saw out of 10, for every question you answered, it did relay it back to what that looked like in terms of alcohol units consumed, or what it did look like in terms of calories consumed, or and so forth, and then that used an algorithm at the back end to kind of convert it into a score. So it was definitely a big challenge with the policy teams, because they wanted different types of language. They certainly didn't like running for a bus as being the kind of an assessment of how people feel fit, but they really engaged with the idea of keeping people going through that journey. So that they were great, but it was definitely, that was a big challenge initially. There is no unhealthy burger and there is no healthy burger. It depends entirely on how you cook it, and it depends entirely on what you put on it, etc., which is perfectly reasonable. But it was trying to also give the user perspective that that's what they saw as unhealthy. So how do you do that? Technically, the biggest challenge was getting bloody playlists to work in the Couch to 5K app. That was the biggest challenge. We wrestled with it. I was going back through the archives with Martin, who was one of our delivery managers for it. He said, I sat there for hours with the dev team trying to get... So basically, you want to keep the coach talking and you want to fade in and out of the playlist, because that's what you're motivated. That was the biggest technical challenge of the lot. The thing that would have been nice to resolve more quickly, and over time, I think they've now done it. So we certainly handed it over by the end of 2019. Somebody else has been, or other people have been running it since, to their credit, was the data side of it. So being able to really take data across the different tools in order to, think about promotion, think about activation as people are thinking about their journey. But from our perspective, it obviously is some time ago, and those types of tools and those types of AI initiatives and everything else has moved so far forward. I reckon it'd be much easier or much better now to do it. So I'd say those are cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, you're allowed to clap. Yes. All right, our next speaker is Charley. Yeah, tonight is very special because Charley transforming from being an organizer to also speaking as well. So Charley, I'll introduce you. So Charley is survey designer and user researcher. She also a founder of Inclusively. She founded this company in 2019, and her specialty is in healthcare. So she has projects around accessibility to healthcare of homeless, and also she's also working improving in the end of life cycle as well. And today she'll be sharing her experience throughout her journey, and also about inclusive co-design in healthcare, and also how to run the workshop with people with lived experience. So over to you, Charley.
Thanks so much, Beth. Hi again. Thank you so much for that introduction. Feels really weird to be on the other side of it. I think I've said hi like 3 times today, so I think we're good. As Beth said, I set up Inclusively a couple of years ago. I set up Inclusively so that I could focus on projects that help to make the world a more inclusive and accessible space. Inclusively is mainly just me, but I do get to work with some really lovely other freelancers, and you'll see some of that work shortly. I often work directly with clients and with agencies also to deliver projects. And on screen, you've got a couple of different images. So these are images from across projects showing final deliverables like animated videos, people filling out kind of worksheets, classically rooms with lots of post-it notes and lots of people doing things and looking busy. At Inclusively, what we really focus on is creating a world that is more human, more empowering, and more inclusive. And the 2 images that are up on screen, the top one kind of just shows a couple of people working around a table in a really collaborative way. And again, the second image, a lot more pictures of post-it notes and me running a workshop. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that project shortly. That was a lot of post-it notes in Brighton, and it was a really enjoyable session. Some of the people that we've managed to work with over the last couple of years, Really, really pleased with the kind of array here. A lot of it is healthcare and public and charity focused. That's kind of the main area that we work in. Some of the types of things that we've been doing. So we've been working on supporting how to improve the uptake of breast cancer screening appointments. I've been doing some work in end-of-life care, an area that I've always wanted to work in, so it's a real privilege to be in that space. I've worked on 2 projects in end-of-life care so far. One helping to improve end-of-life care in hospital environments with the Helix Centre, and another with a really amazing small charity that's helping to try and improve children's palliative care around the world. I've also done some work within the mental health services, a lovely project that I got to work with Snook a couple of years ago with children and young people. Also got to do some stuff in the physical hospital environment space, something that I've always wanted to do. This was a lovely project that I got to work with an amazing freelancer, Lucy Stewart. We got to help work with the Great Ormond Street Hospital and Sensing Spaces of Healthcare to explore how to improve hospital environments for children and young people. And then also working with some kind of healthcare charities, so working with Common Collective, a shout out to Kat, who's over in the room, to help Breast Cancer Now understand how they can support people to more regularly look and feel their breasts. Also doing some amazing work at the British Heart Foundation, and also working on some improving cancer pathways. So I'm trying to bring in experience from across all of these different areas to try and spread some learnings across these spaces. So I'm going to talk you through 3 healthcare case studies, and then I'm just going to talk through some things that I've learned along the way. So this is that lovely project that was based in Brighton. So this was all about co-creating further inclusive and accessible healthcare services for people experiencing homelessness. I got to work with 2 wonderful charities, Just Life and Arch, that are both based in Brighton, and they came together to create Common Ambition. And Common Ambition, basically the whole reason for it being between these 2 charities was to work out how to improve healthcare services for people experiencing homelessness. So I worked with them over a number of months, and we kind of set up a panel of people with lived experience of homelessness, and we went through multiple design sprints and did quite a lot of upskilling, and we kind of prototyped out different things that we could do to help improve access for people who are experiencing homelessness for healthcare services. So the images on screen, you can see that some of the things that we were doing was kind of like bringing people along the journey of prototyping out things together. I'll talk a little bit more about this later, about how can we co-design in such a way that enables people to feel really comfortable doing it. As I know, I'm sure a lot of people have heard that, but I can't draw. So we'll come back to that later. This was that wonderful project that I got to work with Lucy Stewart on. So we were supporting the Great Ormond Street Hospital and Sensing Spaces of Healthcare. And it had 2 focuses, so children and young people, but also maternity wards. So this project really focused on how do we understand what the current experience is like for people on maternity wards? How do we understand what the current experience is like for children and young people on children and young people wards? And then what is it that we can do to enable them to think about, if you could change any of these physical environments, what would have the biggest impact for you? So a really fun brief to be able to work out how do you get children and young people to feel really engaged with something like this. Children and young people are always like the best people to ever do any ideation exercise with. Something that will always stay with me. I don't know, I'm sure a lot of you have done the 100 ways to squeeze a lemon activity. The best answer ever was a stampede of chihuahuas. That will stay with me forever. No adults have ever come up with that, I'm afraid. So this project, basically, we understood a couple of different amazing ideas. There was a talking tooth that was going to be a person that would help you understand what you can do on the ward and things like that. Just really, really creative ideas, but also taking it back to realistically what can we do in this space. And some of those prototypes are now kind of being rolled out and tried and tested. And then my final case study, so I worked on a project to co-design inclusive touch points to increase the attendance rate for breast cancer screening. So this is a project with the NHS Imperial College London, and I brought in a really amazing animator called Kaimo, and this Lucy Stewart also helped inclusively on this project. So this project came about because breast screening uptake is declining specifically a lot in London to a point that it's kind of not acceptable. And in particular, there's a lower uptake across lower age groups, areas with high deprivation, people with physical and mental health illnesses, and those with intellectual disabilities. The amazing behavioural scientists that we worked with on this project had already done some research to understand that something that they could do in this space was to create an animation that would go out alongside the text message that would go through what's the kind of main barriers and reasons why people don't come. So we ran a series of co-design workshops where we spoke through what are the different barriers, what are the things that you could see someone talking through that would resonate for you, that would make you think, actually, you know what, I am going to go. Some of those barriers were things like, well, I've checked myself, so I don't need to go along for a mammogram. I'm scared it's going to hurt. I don't know what's about to happen. A lot of also things around like, is it going to be accessible for me? If I'm in a wheelchair, what happens with the machine? Is it going to move? All of that sort of stuff. So this kind of video is created and it's being piloted across London at the moment. So we really believe that inclusively designed products and services enable as many people as possible to use, but also really importantly, enjoy and benefit from them. To design something inclusively, you need to design keeping in mind accessibility, age, ethnicity, economic situation, geographic location, language, and much more. Some of the things that we try to make sure that we're considering to design inclusive research and services are how can we ensure we're meeting someone's accessibility needs and creating an enjoyable and inclusive experience? How can we make sure the research, service, or experience is accessible for someone whose English isn't their first or isn't their preferred language? How can we make sure that we are supporting someone throughout the experience in a way that actually works well for them? How can we ensure that it will work for people in various economic situations? How can we ensure that it's working for people in various cultural backgrounds, taking into account structural racism to ensure it's equitable? How do we design a service that works for people of various ages, or people that do or don't feel comfortable with technology? And what about making sure that this service or experience will work no matter where you're based geographically, whether that's urban or rural, or whether you're going to have further access barriers to actually going somewhere physically? We talk quite a lot about kind of accessibility versus inclusive design. I really feel like accessibility is a basic requirement. It should always be kind of out there. But inclusive design is more of a mindset. It's going further than making it accessible. It's making it really enjoyable as an experience. So some things that we've learned through projects. Here's an overview, and then I'm just going to go through each one of these in a little bit more detail. So we've really learned that the key to supporting participants and people with lived experience is kind of flexibility and being led by them as much as possible. Doesn't make project planning easy, but definitely makes sure that you're going to get better involvement. Inclusive co-design takes a really good amount of time and preparation and finding out what will work best for people. Number 3, over-index on the amount of people you speak to who are more likely to be experiencing inclusion barriers. And 4, design for people at their best and worst moments. So I'll go through those in a bit more detail. So this one around kind of making sure that you're supporting participants and people with lived experience in being as flexible as possible. We often work with lived experience across different projects. So for like the end of life care project, we made sure that we have a great team of lived experience, people with lived experience to work with. Finding these people is often really hard. So you've got to have a multitude of avenues and approaches. Going out and flyering and chatting to people sometimes is the best way. Keeping involvement flexible is key to getting good engagement. So making sure that you're offering up all the different ways that someone could get involved. Is that weekly meetings? Is that you're just going to send an email with a couple of things for them to be able to review because that's all they've really got time for? Are you meeting outside of normal hours? What is it that they want to most be involved? What are they motivated by to be involved in this project? And then also ensuring to provide support throughout and after the sessions. So having someone with mental health first aid training to be able to be there and do a debrief and that sort of stuff is really important. Making sure it's human first. But ultimately just asking people what's the best way for us to involve you, and being ready that if you've got 3 or 4 lived experience representatives, you might be doing it completely differently for everyone, and that's still going to be the best way of you getting engagement. The image of the screen is a couple of people in a workshop surrounded by lots of post-it notes. Second one, inclusive co-design takes a good amount of preparation and finding out what will work best for people. The co-design tools that we often use, Miro, Mural, Figma, Sketch, they're not very accessible or inclusive, which makes our job really hard. I would absolutely love to work on this, so if anyone wants to do anything in this space, let me know. But at the moment, I think we're stuck with quite a lot of workarounds. Figma are doing some stuff in this space to try and make sure that prototyping tools have more kind of accessibility for screen readers, but there's still a way to go. So what we tend to do is if we're trying to co-design a prototype, so on the screen there's just like an image of a website prototype for the work that I've been doing with the Children's Palliative Care charity, we basically visually describe this in a Word document and then send it over so that it'll act more as the screen reader accessible way of someone being able to be involved in it. I never expect anyone to use Miro in a workshop, but I do use it as a way of showing up what's happening and then always talking through anything that's on the screen. But it also really works well to capture the notes and people to be able to see it. The amount of times that we've done that and then someone's like, oh no, actually, like, you haven't fully got what I was meaning. But most importantly, just asking people what might work best for them. So this is, what's on the screen is some images of some prototyping printouts. And this is what worked really well for when I was working on the project to increase uptake of healthcare services for people experiencing homelessness. We were trying to basically think about what's the best way of someone feeling as confident as possible prototyping when a lot of people's initial reaction is, I don't draw. A lot of the things that we were looking at, they were in the digital space, some of them not. But we basically created this kind of kit that enables you to cut and stick and take out small, like the kind of key icons that we're all quite used to using when you're thinking about a digital service. And what this enabled people to do was just to feel quite quickly you can create something that looks visually quite good, and it just really built that confidence, and people were happy then to like draw over the top of it. It made a massive difference on that project. Number 3, over-indexing on the amount of people you speak to who are more likely to be experiencing inclusion barriers. So, for example, people whose English isn't their first or preferred language, people who are digitally excluded, people from marginalised groups, people with disabilities and accessibility needs, and the list goes on. If you design a service to work for people who may experience the most barriers to access, you're going to be designing a better service for everyone else as well. This on the screen is an image from Cards for Humanity. It was a card game that was created whilst I was at IDEAN a couple of years ago. It basically works as a set of personas for you to test your service and think about the different things that you might need to consider. So it goes through and it says, this person is shy, or this person is outgoing, or this person is blind or has some accessibility needs, or this person has 2 young kids that are screaming at them. How is it that they're going to best use your service? And it helps you to think about the different scenarios that someone might be in when they're picking up whatever you've designed. And number 4, design for people at their best and worst moments. So we're all living our lives while we're interacting with these services, but sometimes I think it gets a bit too easy to forget that when you're designing it for someone. Financial difficulty, death, life-changing accidents, closing down of businesses, all of these things happen while someone's using a service that you might be creating. So designing by having these key life events in mind, similar to the Cards for Humanity, like asking yourself, well, what would happen if someone's using this service and someone died? What happens if someone's using this service and they're in financial difficulty? What do they do? If you want to read a bit more about that, I wrote a blog post about it a little while ago. And the image on the screen is like kind of hand-drawn prototypes working through a customer support journey, thinking about some of these things. So as a little recap, some of the things that we picked up along the way is flexibility being the key thing to be able to work with lived experience representatives in the best way. Number 2, inclusive co-design takes a good amount of time and preparation and make sure that you're working with people to understand what will work best for them. Always try and over-index on the amount of people you speak to who are more likely to be experiencing inclusion barriers, and try and design for people for their best and worst moments. Thank you.
Amazing. That was epic, wasn't it? So we've got time for one question for Charley, so let's make it a good one. Put your hand up if you've got a question. I've put too much pressure on you, haven't I? Okay.
It was really interesting, thanks. So in your co-design work, how often have you got into the problem where they discover like an issue that stems out from the scope of the project, and how do you kind of manage that? So, because there's obviously systemic barriers and all these things. I'm just curious how you kind of play with that and work with that.
That was an excellent question. Okay.
It was a great question, thank you. It was something that came out quite a bit on that project in particular as well, because there was only so much that Common Ambition and those two charities could really affect and change. So we did a prioritisation exercise after we'd done some ideation. We kind of worked out what the barriers were, did some ideation around those barriers, pulled together some prototypes, and we basically laid all those prototypes out on the floor and created a life-size prioritisation matrix that was basically just making it really clear for us what's going to have the most impact, what can we realistically change. And that's how we, like, physically, people stood up with the kind of different prototypes and ideas and stood in the different spaces, and we had a kind of debate around it. But I think just literally trying to, like, physically have that discussion as much as possible, but also making it quite tangible, I think, really helped too.
Awesome. Brilliant. Round of applause for Charley. Great. This is our graduate slot. So I'm going to ask Radha to come up and speak about her recent graduation and what she's looking for in life. Come on up. And then we've got time for one more graduate. So if you feel ready, okay, best is pick somebody. You're next, in a non-threatening way. Go for it.
Thank you. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Radha. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an Asian Indian woman with, I don't know, average size, average height, brown color, curly black hair. I was told to introduce myself that way. So I recently graduated from University of the Arts, London. I did my master's in service design. Before that, I did my bachelor's in design in graphic design and visual communication. I'm currently looking for opportunities in London to work in any capacity, full-time, part-time, contract work, freelance, as an intern, anything. My interests are in healthcare and inclusive design because my major project was also in healthcare. So I was designing for women with PCOS, that's polycystic ovarian syndrome, and how workspaces can be more inclusive for them and how we can make a better healthcare system here in UK, especially for those women, and how always taking the pill isn't the only answer. So yeah, that's pretty much me. I don't have a lot to talk about, but honestly, I'm open to any sort of work, so just please reach out to me if you have anything. I'm pretty traditional that way, so I have like a couple of copies of my CV with me, which I'm going to hand out later. Thank you.
Brilliant. Excellent, excellent. I love that people with PCOS got a shout out there. And the CV is actually quite high tech because it's got a QR code on it. So thank you. Thank you for getting up here and doing what feels quite scary, probably. Right, so we've got our next graduate. Come on up. Round of applause. Hold those together.
Okay.
That's it.
So hey guys, it's like so lovely to see you all like under this lovely weather. So like yeah, thanks. Before, my name is Ling, like Ling with a G, and I'm now currently studying in Royal College of Art, also in service design program. And before coming to London, I was working in a digital transformation sector for the leading funeral home in Taiwan. I'm from Taiwan. And for like a couple of months. And before that, I was working in as a growth and B2B marketing associate in a SaaS company. And now that I'm in UK and me and my teammate are like doing a final project on care for caregivers. That's also the reason we're here today. So I'd like to like briefly introduce my teammate to you guys. This is Dewi. She's like 3 years experience multidisciplinary designer from Indonesia, and that is Trisha. Trisha is like from India with 3 years working experience in Wangdudi, the design agency. So yeah, my name is Ling. Feel free to like come to me, and I'm also like graduating in July and being eagerly applying and like searching for jobs now, like service designer, product manager, and also growth marketing. So if you know, like, if you have any opportunities, like, feel free to connect. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ling. And yeah, there's going to be plenty of mingling time, so it's good to know that we've got a lot of talent in the room and people can get chatting to each other. So now we have a talk from Kaitlin Devella. Kaitlin is a freelance content design lead. Kaitlin is an absolutely epic content designer, worked with Defra, worked with lots of startups, including Wise, Workday, Juniver, Preply, and Kaitlin is going to talk about healthcare content for sensitive moments. So come on up, give her a round of applause. Oh yeah. There we go.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. Hi everyone. So my name is Kaitlin Devella, and as Charlie said, I'm a freelance content designer based here in London. My pronouns are she, her. I have very long brown hair. I'm wearing all black, and I am a white woman. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight, and I'm really excited to talk to you about content design in healthcare. So recently, I've worked on quite a few projects related to healthcare. Whether it's been writing educational content for eating disorder recovery or designing pregnancy care pathways, I've noticed one really strong theme emerge in my writing work. So when it comes to writing healthcare information, I've found that it's very important to pay close attention to sensitive moments in the user journey. Forgot about my slide. So that's what I'm going to dig into today. First, I will go through the basics of writing content for healthcare. Then I'm going to share a really interesting little case study about pregnancy called the Generation Study. And then I'll wrap up with a few writing tips for sensitive moments. So let's get into it. Healthcare is a space that's particularly fraught emotionally. Being in a medical environment can bring up a lot of feelings, from fear and anxiety to relief and joy. And oftentimes, it's just really frustrating and confusing, right? So we're talking about some of the most stressful and important moments of people's lives. And we're also talking about some pretty complex subjects, unfamiliar scientific terminology, awkward topics about your body, and lots of red tape. So how do we make things simple for people who read our healthcare content? Well, if content design is about answering a user need in the best way, then healthcare content design is about giving patients the right level of information at the right moment. And to me, that means not overwhelming patients with content when they're processing difficult news, right? And it also means using crystal clear language that doesn't alienate anyone or confuse them. And it also means understanding the different contexts that patients might be in and what their capacity is to receive new information. That's why I think it's really important to identify the particularly sensitive moments in a user journey. When we're stressed or anxious, it can be a lot harder to read and process information. And then afterward, it can be even harder to recall that information. So I'll just throw out a few classic examples here. Let's say I've just been diagnosed with a health disorder. My brain is completely overheating with panic and worry. I don't hear a word my doctor says to me on the phone. I wish it was all written down so that I could focus on it later when I'm ready. Or maybe I'm being asked to take part in a new healthcare study, but the study is about something that goes against my religion. Or maybe I'm receiving test results on the phone, but I'm also looking after a bunch of screaming children, and I absolutely cannot retain any of the information that I'm hearing. So in these moments, it's really important that we communicate clearly and we make sure that there are multiple ways that a user can receive information. We need to be aware of different cultural and situational considerations. So key moments that I've identified in the healthcare journey: giving consent, getting results, getting a diagnosis, early stages of dealing with a healthcare condition, and learning about your treatment plan. Okay, so all of this is a lot to consider in the abstract, so let's dive into a real example. This one is called the Generation Study, and I worked on it with Genomics England, which is an arm of the UK Department for Health. So the Generation Study is a clinical study about genetic testing. Here's how it works. Right now, the NHS tests newborn babies for 9 genetic conditions. And they'd like to expand that to about 200 conditions, which would be pretty amazing for public health and save a lot of lives. So in order to do that, the study is recruiting people who are pregnant, who would like to get this expanded testing for their babies. So I worked with the team to design educational materials about the study, along with an informed consent tool to enroll patients, and content to support treatment pathways for the babies that did get diagnosed with a genetic condition. But honestly, all of this is really, really complicated to explain to the public. Turns out people have a lot of really strong feelings and beliefs about pregnancy and about parenthood, and especially about genetic testing. Health literacy in the UK is at an all-time low, and on a more basic level, pregnancy is a really emotionally intense reckoning with your identity. All of this is to say, this is a sensitive time. That brings me to the core content design problem to solve. How do we accurately refer to the user of the Generation Study? How might we be precise, accurate, and inclusive? A lot of people might say that the user is obviously the mother, but not everyone identifies with that word. And some people who identify as mothers would not be eligible to join the study. We didn't want to alienate anyone. We didn't want to create more confusion during an already stressful time. So as designers, we made a few assumptions. We assumed that mother was not a very inclusive term because it alienates some queer people. We assumed that birthing parent was a more inclusive way to refer to this user group. And we also assumed that if you're reading our educational materials about the study, you're probably in a maternity ward of a hospital, so you're most likely our core user by default. Problem solved. But through user research, we learned that the reality was actually super different. So first of all, mother was not always the correct term for the study itself. The Generation Study, which is about genetic testing, doesn't actually look at the person whose egg is involved in making the baby, or the person who has parental responsibility for the child. It actually just looks at the person who is literally pregnant, carrying the baby, because the important data point is the antenatal chart. Complicated stuff. Took a while to unravel that. So that means no adoptions, no surrogates, and having to unfortunately exclude some same-sex couples. The next thing we learned was that the term birthing parent was factually accurate, but a lot of people really didn't understand it. People who were still learning English or from different social and political backgrounds just didn't get it at all, and they found that term really alienating, actually. And last but not least, it turns out lots of people go to maternity wards for appointments, and we had a lot of partners really interested in taking part in the study who were a bit annoyed to find out that they couldn't, even though it was about their child too. So a lot of tricky stuff during a time of heightened emotions about people's identities and their responsibility. So when research reveals really complicated things like this, I find that it's helpful to turn to the available policies and guidance, see what other people have already figured out. So the NHS Style Guide is amazing, and it suggests removing all gender-based labels altogether from your product and just saying you directly to your user in second person. And that's going to be really helpful in some cases for the generation study, but what about when that user needs to find out if they're actually eligible to join the study? Well, we took a look at the Royal College of Midwifery, who conducted a massive study with pregnant people to understand how they want to be referred to in healthcare settings. The guidance says that you should be additive rather than reductive when it comes to addressing pregnant people. That means you should say mother or birthing parent, or mother or pregnant person. That's a really good way to be precise without alienating or confusing anyone. So that's what we landed on for the study. We used the second person you wherever possible, and when it was important to be precise to explain eligibility, we said pregnant person or mother, and then we always explained why that was. When we used these terms together along with an explanation, we found that users really got it. So on this image, you'll see an example of the Generation Study website in her shining glory. It says, changing the future of healthcare together, of genetic health together, I can read. Our study tests your baby for 200 plus conditions. This test is free, safe, and takes place just after birth. And here you'll see a snapshot from the eligibility criteria, which goes into more specific detail with an explanation. Here is a little snapshot from the back end of a tool that nurses and clinicians use when they're enrolling people for the study. So we've developed little components that are drop-down where if anyone wonders why we're asking these questions, for example, why do I have to be 16 years old? I'm 15 and I'm pregnant. What's the problem? We explain that you need to be 16 years old in the UK to consent to medical treatment. So this allowed us to make sure that everyone was getting the same consistent and inclusive experience. And here is another snapshot from the website where you can see different ways of accessing learning materials, so patients could read in a way that works well for them on their terms. Overall, I've found that focusing on the sensitive moments for users in healthcare journeys allowed me to get a much clearer sense of their needs and how I can meet them with words. So let's wrap up with a few tips. Tip number 1. Focus on user needs, not personal opinions. So we all bring our own identities and experiences to the table as designers, especially when it comes to sensitive moments. I found it really interesting that most of our assumptions were proven completely wrong during research, and it led me to believe even more strongly that progressive language isn't always the most accessible language. Sometimes not always. Next, consider cultural contexts. In healthcare settings, like all public service settings, users come from different religious and cultural backgrounds, different language backgrounds, and have different levels of health literacy. So it's really important to research with all different types of users and ensure that whatever you're designing accounts for everyone's needs. Charlie talked about this. And last but not least, make some guidelines. I shared how helpful it was for me to consult the NHS and the Royal College of Midwifery guidelines during my project. And having guidelines means consistent content. And consistent content means more trust with your users and an overall increased feeling of safety. Here's a little screenshot from the guidelines that I created for the generation study. And this helps make sure that even super granular terms like 200 plus rather than around 200 are consistent everywhere we talk to users. This makes sure that people trust the study and think it's credible. With that, I'm going to wrap up. So here are some of the sources that I referenced during this talk. We've got the NHS standard for creating health content, the NHS guide for sex, gender, and sexuality, really good stuff in there. And check out the generation study if you're interested. Thank you so much.
That was epic. Stay here for a few questions. Yeah, you always know it's a good talk when people are taking pictures of the screen during. So does anyone have any questions for Kaitlin? Couple of questions I reckon we've got time for.
Is there a reason why people supporting the pregnant person were not involved in the work that you did?
Your question was, is there a reason that you're supporting pregnant women in the work that you're doing? Or did I misunderstand?
People supporting the pregnant person, they were not meant to be involved in the first place, right? Any reason why?
Thank you so much. Really important question to me because I found it very important during working on this project to make sure that people know that not everyone has a traditional nuclear heterosexual family where there's one person supporting the pregnant person and that's it. A lot of people have different setups and different people that help them make decisions, and we should make sure to include all of them in the process. So the materials that we designed allowed them to be very included in the decision-making process, but when it came to actually taking the blood sample, it had to be the person who had antenatal records. So the person who has a folder with all of their healthcare stuff, I don't really know what goes into those, but it had to be that person for like policy, medical reasons, basically. But honestly, it was really tricky to find this balance between involving all of the people that make up someone's village to care for a baby, and also being like, but in the end, it's all about you, the one who's pregnant.
Really tricky line. Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you. In terms of the number of tests that were being done from 50 to 200, can I ask why the other parent, the genetic material, wasn't also getting consent, considering that it could actually have an impact on, family history and other things that are coming from the other parent, and also how that affects things culturally, because it could be quite different for different cultures?
Another amazing and really tricky question. So part of the enrollment process had to do with collecting sensitive data about the egg and the sperm involved in creating the baby, for lack of a better word, which is really tricky for different types of families, right? Or different types of people who are having a baby. Why weren't they involved? The only person who could consent to join the study is the person who has the medical records, because I feel like I'm giving like a birds and the bees talk, because they have the baby inside of them, if you understand me. But honestly, it's a really tricky ethical concept, especially because you're essentially consenting to someone's genetic data being stored when they're not even born yet. Like, does that baby consent? And what about that baby's other parents? So we had a whole ethics team that we worked with to make sure that all of the language was perfectly legally clear and ethically sound. Really fun working with ethicists. I recommend it.
Oh, that was a tricky one, wasn't it? Oh, well, that's created more questions than it's answered. And I think we do have time, so I'm going to go to you.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent talk. I think Ian touched on this earlier in his talk about the nuances of academic research and then speaking to an audience who don't have that knowledge. And I wonder if you had similar challenges with your stakeholders?
Thank you.
Yes, so challenging. We worked with a lot of genetic scientists who wanted to put graphics of like DNA helixes into the website and the patient information sheet. And so we had to do a lot of like convincing, like, no one cares about DNA, you know? A lot of user testing and a lot of co-designing. A lot of showing people a patient information sheet, which is essentially all of the legal and ethical information that someone needs to read. A 27-page long document with amazing graphics of DNA versus like a 3-page long document. And seeing which one a potential patient was able to recall when it came to informed consent. Like if we were to say, what are you consenting to? They could do that with a shorter, more clear patient information sheet. Does that make sense?
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to wrap this bit up now. So big round of applause for Kaitlin. Thank you. Right, okay, we've done questions. So I want to say a big thank you. So thank you so much to Ian for the excellent talk about Couch to 5K and for hosting us at Transform. Brilliant. And it was super interesting to hear about behavior change being embedded into this digital platform and also this 1U quiz, which we can actually still do, which is, yeah, oh no, not 1U quiz, sorry, How Are You quiz. So yeah, brilliant and definitely something that I want to try out. So thank you, round of applause. Then we heard from Charley. So one of the things that Charley said, which was interesting, was talking about getting children and young people engaged and how they did get very engaged, and they actually talked about a herd of chihuahuas squeezing a lemon. So that's something that definitely stuck with me. But also those inclusive design principles are totally ones that I'm going to take away and use in my work, especially around flexibility and how you bring people in during the co-design process and things change during the co-design process. Super helpful tips. And then we heard from our graduates. So we heard from Radha and we heard from Ling, and there's a bit of time to mingle and chat to them, keep making those connections. So yeah, big thank you to those people for stepping up. And then Kaitlin, what a talk, talking about really sensitive moments, kind of the beginning of a little human being's life. And who knew that we were going to go from 8 tests to 200 tests? Like, what an amazing kind of movement in medicine. So yeah, brilliant. And user needs, not personal opinions. Something that I think we're all going to take away into our work. So yeah, thank you so much. And big thank you to Best for presenting everybody and kind of bringing us all together. So the thing that I want to announce is about the pub. Wait for it. The name of the pub is, maybe we'll have a little drum roll for the name of the pub because it's changed. Here we go. So the name of the pub is the Yorkshire Grey rather than the George, and the Yorkshire Grey is just like 3 minutes up the road. But I think we've got enough time to kind of mingle about here, finish any snacks, please have a chat, and then you're welcome to join us at the Yorkshire Grey. So thank you so much for coming.